Berkeley, California, Sunday, June 10th. It's coming up. I'm going to be speaking at Skeptical 2018. My talk is titled Skepticism in the Age of Artificial Intelligence. If you're in the area, head over to skepticalcon.com. That'll be in the show notes as well. There's a great lineup of speakers. The Sci-Babe will be there. We'll hear talks on myths of the homelessness, the hacking of the American child, fake news and journalistic integrity, and Seth Shostak from SETI and the Big Picture Science podcast is going to be there. It's a great lineup. I can't wait for this event. I hope to see some of you there. And one last thing before we get started for this week, thanks to our sponsor Galvanize. You'll hear from them in the middle.
Welcome to Data Skeptic. Our mini episodes are gentle introductions to concepts related to artificial intelligence. These short discussions are meant to serve as a primer for the topic. Learn more by reading our show notes at dataskeptic.com.
Maybe I should apologize out of the gate for my voice this week. What do you think?
I guess.
I'm a little under the weather, but it's kind of bassy. It might sound good. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe just start by saying, I always wanted a deep voice.
Welcome to a cool episode of Data Skeptic. All right, so today we're talking about Kalman filters.
Kalman, how do you spell Kalman?
Kalman, Kalman.
Kalman.
And if you've never heard of this topic before, it might be better to think of it as a Kalman tracker, because the filter part, even though it's a good word choice, it doesn't necessarily carry the intuition. Because what a Kalman filter is really great for is tracking where something is. I mean, you can do a lot of stuff with it, but that's the main idea. I was thinking we could talk about what if our bird Yoshi got out of the house and we wanted to track her so we could get her safely back home.
Well, I think that's a very scary thought.
Right, so don't you want the best mathematical formalisms available to you to help track her?
Oh, when you put it that way, I can try to be positive.
So we'd go out and we'd look for her. We wouldn't see her constantly, right? Because she'd go behind trees and buildings and stuff like that.
Yeah, she's green, so she blends in.
But we'd get glimpses of her. The same analogy we could do with radar people, where they see blips, but they're irregular, so you only see her every so often. Now, how do you predict where she's going to be next?
I guess you follow where she's been and continue that projection.
Yeah, exactly. So you would take her current trajectory, her position and velocity, and you would carry it forward. So if she's heading due east at 2 miles per hour.
I think she can fly faster than 2 miles an hour. That's how fast a human walks.
Oh, yeah.
And we could confirm birds go faster than a walking human.
Yeah, she'd probably have to be at least 30 miles an hour.
30?
I don't know. Actually, I have no idea.
I don't know, but she must be at least 5 times faster, so maybe at least 15 miles per hour.
Linda, we gotta figure out a way to measure her speed. All right, that's for another episode.
I'll leave that to you.
Yeah, that'll be a project for me when I have some free time. Okay, so back to the Kalman filter. The Kalman filter is based on the Gaussian distribution.
Gaussian, yeah. They have that Gaussian blur on Photoshop.
Yeah.
That's the most common one I use.
Yeah, tell me your interpretation of how that works.
I just hit the button Gaussian blur, and I pick a few properties and hit go, apply.
What sort of properties?
I don't remember.
Mean and variance?
They have a few things. You just click it around and you could get a preview for what it means.
Oh, come on, Adobe.
I don't remember.
There's supposed to be 2 parameters, mu and sigma. Mu is the mean, sigma is the standard deviation.
I don't think they phrased it that way, but they probably used another phrase.
Well, they really oughta. That's what it is. So, why is it great that it's a Gaussian distribution? Because hopefully your data fits a Gaussian model. If it doesn't, you really shouldn't pick a Kalman filter. But even if it's close but no cigar, you still might want to pick the Kalman filter because it's extremely efficient to compute. Let's think more generally. Imagine we didn't know about the Kalman filter and we wanted to track somebody in this way. We would have to start with a belief over where they are, right? So let's just assume that as Yoshi got loose, we knew her initial position. How do we know where she goes next?
I thought we were tracking her like a blip.
Yeah, but it doesn't work perfectly. If it's not as if she goes in a straight line at a constant speed. She'll change directions, all kinds of stuff like that.
I don't know. How will we know? I thought that was the whole point of the show. You're going to tell me.
Well, let's get into it. You have to have some way of updating your beliefs. Probably the most complicated way of updating your beliefs would be to run a full simulation of every neuron in Yoshi's brain and every signal that she's getting from the environment and use that then to predict what her next move would be. But technology does not allow us to do such a simulation today.
Why?
Well, we don't have a model of her brain. and we wouldn't be able to stream all of her visual systems into that machine as quickly as her brain does it.
Oh, she's more efficient.
Yeah, so by today's standards, she's unsimulatable. Even a little bird, let alone a human. The bird, we can't simulate.
Oh, she's so smart.
Yeah, she is quite smart. So we have to approximate her position in some way. Now, we could have some complicated thing that we use, like maybe she makes, more left-hand turns than right-hand turns, or we could build in some mechanism. But if you allow for that, then you get a very kind of chaotic system often after the fact, computing from your current beliefs where the next transition state is, that state transition, that can be very difficult to compute. Let me take it another direction. If we have our initial beliefs about where Yoshi is, we would like our posterior beliefs, that is the beliefs that we have in the future, to be as accurate as possible.
Yeah, that means we could tell the future.
Well, we can make an inference. We can make a prediction, yeah.
Yeah, Kyle doesn't believe in fortune telling.
Well, certainly not fortune telling, no. That process of updating our beliefs, we have to compute them. And for a lot of ways that state transition models work, that process can be very, very expensive to compute. You might need a lot of computational power because you have some complicated model and you don't have like a closed form solution to it. So if your data can be modeled as some, linear variable, like her just moving in the same direction she was in, plus a noisy observation, meaning, with some probability she's going to veer off in a random direction, kind of a random walk. If you can model your system, in this case our bird flying around, as that linear variable and the noisy observation, then you can use a Gaussian distribution to describe her. And the reason we like that is because the Bayesian update, how we update our beliefs given new information, for a Gaussian distribution that has a closed form. And what that means is it's just a simple formula to calculate it. It's not some elaborate process. We can kind of do it directly.
Not sure what you mean. Tell me more.
All right, so have you ever messed around with like interest calculations, figuring out how much your balance is going to be in the future as your interest compounds?
Oh, I'm the worst at that. How does one do this?
Yeah, it's like 1 plus the interest rate raised to the power of the compound.
I just find an interest compounding calculator and I get them to do it for me.
Right. So how do they do it? Why are they doing it for free?
I don't know.
Well, in most cases, it's a simple formula. You can input the interest rate and the period of time, and they can plug those variables in and make a direct calculation and instantly give it to you the way you would in Excel. For certain situations, so even though it seems difficult to the average person to do compounding interest, it's actually simple from a formula point of view. If you know the formula, you just plug in the values.
Exactly. I don't know what the formula is. That's why I just Google it.
Right.
And then I let some other thing do it for me.
Yeah. I get that you don't necessarily have the formula top of mind, but once you have it, the problem is easy. There are other things, like calculating where things will be in space, like where a satellite is going to end up or where the moon will be. These don't have closed form solutions. You have to do these really more like simulated processes or use MCMC or some more advanced computationally difficult techniques.
Well, don't they leave it to computer? Same thing?
Well, sure, but you got to pay for that computer and you got to, it costs a lot of money to run it.
Is it like Bitcoin? Costs a lot of energy to break it?
Along the same lines, Bitcoin is much worse actually because it's a known difficult problem. It's breaking cryptography has a very hard complexity to it. So mostly they're just making random guesses and doing a lot of them. It's brute force.
But for calculating where a satellite will be, they're not making random guesses.
No random guesses. They follow a procedure. It's still hard, but it's more efficient than brute force.
Okay, so that means they have a purpose, is what I'm hearing.
I don't know where you're going with that. That's not the direction I would take.
Purpose. I'm hearing a purpose.
What's the purpose?
The purpose is to figure out where the satellite will be.
Yeah, exactly. And our purpose is just to know where our bird is.
Yoshi.
So if we trust that her motion is in the way I described, it's a simple sort of linear thing with a noisy, random walk to account for the fact that she might veer off in new directions, then as we get observations, even if they're noisy observations, we can model her with a Kalman filter. And the Kalman filter will always have an up-to-date description of our beliefs and be easy to maintain. So as we get new observations, if one of our neighbors said, hey, we just saw her fly by our backyard, we can use that to update our beliefs.
Yeah, I mean, Yoshi, you can imagine her going on a course, and then if she saw a crow, she would definitely turn and go the opposite way of the crow.
Yeah.
Yoshi does not like crows. Crows are carnivores and omnivores.
Yeah,
they eat meat.
Interestingly, she knows to be afraid of them, even though she's never really met one.
She's never met one, but as soon as she sees or hears of a crow, her eyes get big and she gets scared.
Do the noise. Yeah,
That's Yoshi's scared noise.
So, what about that crow? What if we knew the positions of all the crows and we wanted to build that into our model?
Oh, that would help, yeah.
Well, it might make it more accurate, but it would make it more difficult because now we'd have to simulate the behavior of the crows and stuff, and it might not necessarily give us an advantage. It would be a harder computation. Under a Kalman filter, that just becomes part of the random walk. Like there's always a chance Yoshi encounters a crow, and then she veers off in the opposite direction. So then if we see a contrary observation, we just start updating our beliefs that the mean of where she is, that is, the mean of the direction and velocity, that is shifted. That's taken care of in a very simple arithmetic process.
So how does someone apply the Kalman filter? You just talked about applying it, but how does one exactly do that?
It depends on your application. Let's talk about like robotics, okay? So in robotics, it's often the case that the robot gets imperfect information and can be confused about its location. Or it gets
like the Roomba vacuum cleaner.
Yeah. I can't speak to the Roomba exactly. I don't know much about the product per se, but you're on the right track. So let's hypothesize some cleaning robot. I don't want to get sued here, okay?
You don't want to talk about brands. Yeah, they're not paying us, so we won't talk about them.
So the Roomba has an idea of its position, right, in the room. And then it says, okay, I'm going to turn my motor on, and I'm going to push the wheel in this direction for 5 seconds. And that should make me go forward 5 feet. But after it does that, it might stop, or maybe it's doing it continuously and it's using its sensor systems like shooting lasers or sonar or whatever it does to take new measurements of where the walls are and where its position is. So between the sensor observations, it assumes that it's staying on the same trajectory, but depending on how noisy it is, the observations can be, or how much error there can be in the torque of the wheels, that's captured in the standard deviation of your Gaussian model. So the position spreads out in that bell curve kind of shape until you get new information. So as a new signal comes in saying, hey, we've just measured your position here, you can now do an update, even under imperfect observations, and it's a simple update. So you now just get your posterior mean and your posterior standard deviation. So mu and sigma are the only two parameters you need to calculate where you are, and you can efficiently update those using the Kalman filter at any time. So it's great in robotics because that robot doesn't probably have a lot of computer power on it. And even if it did have a fancy computer on board, it doesn't want to use it a lot because it's going to drain the battery. The more efficient it can be with its computation, the better. And if it can track its position efficiently with a Kalman filter, which I think it probably could, that's a really good application for a Kalman filter. It would take in all its observations, imperfect though they might be, and update its model in a very elegant way.
So how do we apply it with Yoshi?
Well, Yoshi's the same idea. We have a known position of where we think she is. We know her position and velocity, basically, and that's the parameters to our model. And then we have some uncertainty about it. And that uncertainty needs to capture the likelihood she won't follow the path. So whereas the robot, I bet you they've got that down to a science. They know, you apply this many volts to the motor, the wheel is going to turn this many times and move it forward this much. It's probably pretty precise, even though it can skid, right? Skidding is a form of noise. Yoshi, on the other hand, she's an autonomous agent. She might go in random directions for random reasons as she encounters different things in the environment. She could see food or foes or friends or who knows what. So that we just have to capture as noise if we don't model it. So our update, we'd have to be getting constant observations of where she is when we can see her. And if we can't see her, the uncertainty takes over a little bit, and our belief about where she is spreads out until we get a new observation in which case we can update our beliefs again.
Well, my name's Madi, and I have a kind of an odd path to data science. I was working in the international development and policy space for years in DC, and eventually got a little burnt out on that. I think I kind of plateaued on the self-study front, so then that's when I returned to Galvanize.
Thanks to this week's sponsor, Galvanize. Mari is an alumni of their data science program.
I realized that I loved data science. I loved being able to turn statistics and programming into something more meaningful.
Galvanize is a 13-week full-time immersive program.
It was an amazing experience. It was 3 months of super intense work and fun, and I got a ton out of it.
The daily instruction from industry veterans prepare students for building capstone projects that exhibit the skills they learned.
I learned the ins and outs of natural language processing. I decided to build off of that for my capstone, and I worked with a friend of mine from grad school who's starting her own nonprofit focused on maternal health and nutrition. New mothers, when they're trying to figure out what they should be eating, they're often bombarded by information. So I built a classifier to help them determine whether or not the article that their great aunt Sally has sent them is actually legitimate nutrition information or if it's clickbait.
The Galvanize Data Science program teaches Python, statistics, machine learning, natural language processing, as we heard, as well as the tools and processes required to be a successful industry professional.
One of the most valuable things that I learned was the crisp DM approach to designing and building data science solutions. Now that I'm a consultant, I've used that in practice to be able to frame the question out the gate in a proper way and then tackle it.
If you'd like to learn the crisp DM process or the other skills of a data scientist, visit galvanize.com/dataskeptic. There you can learn more about Galvanize's program. Thanks again to Mari for sharing her Galvanize story. Once again, learn more by visiting galvanize.com/dataskeptic.
So in a real life case scenario, if Yoshi were to fly out, how long would it take to get this model up and running to actually help us? Or if it takes hours, then it's not actually useful.
Yeah, I was hoping you wouldn't ask that, because it's only in theory useful for tracking Yoshi. I mean, if we had a serious problem of Yoshi getting out, I could build a camera system, and the system could have some image recognition that knows her position, and those signals could be fed into a system that would be automated and fast. But just pen and paper, no, you wouldn't be fast with this. But when you do it in a computer, that pen and paper calculation is very simple, and you can do it super fast.
But how long would it take to set up in a computer?
Well, the hard part of that project would be putting a lot of cameras in place and then building some sort of deep learning network that recognizes Yoshi.
So that's really the first step, which is a separate issue.
Yeah, that's how you get your observations. Once you have your observations, that's when a Kalman filter becomes useful.
You can't just say, me, I'll be the observer and I'll enter the data manually.
You could, and in some situations that might work. Like, I know they did use Kalman filters a long time ago in like the, World War II and stuff to track submarines. They didn't have powerful computers then. They still were probably using them, but they could have done some pen and paper stuff there, because I guess the, observations were a little infrequent. Yoshi, on the other hand, flies very quickly, so you'd need rapid observations to keep up to date on the state transitions and stuff.
Well, Yoshi, even though she does fly quickly, she's got a little chub in her, so I think she would get tired and want a break.
Yeah, maybe we need to exercise
She's not
her.
a wild bird.
No.
She's a lazy bird.
A little bit.
So I think she would fly, take a break until she caught her breath, and then go whoop, 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 and fly somewhere else.
So the part I want to stress here is what's special about the Kalman filter comes from a statistical property. The Gaussian distribution has this closed form update, so it's easy to represent your beliefs with these two parameters. That's the secret why the Kalman filter can work so fast.
The secret.
Well, it's not a secret. Everybody knows it. It's the key insight.
So what's the key insight for the Kalman filter?
If you describe your beliefs with a Gaussian, it has a closed form update, which is also Gaussian.
Why is that good, though?
Because then your beliefs are easy to update. Let's say, on the other hand, you were modeling like a stock price. If you knew a lot of data about how the stock was going to go up or down relative to other signals and stuff like that, you might have this elaborate model that maybe it's very accurate, but if it takes you a long time to compute it, you're going to be slow to make your next trade. So you need a model that's fast enough to still be good at trading. So, okay, maybe your model could be a little bit more complicated than the Gaussian and still be computable, but probably not, because if it doesn't have a closed form solution, then over time, the belief update gets more and more complicated, because your belief about the state something could be in gets harder and harder to describe, and you need more parameters to describe it.
So more parameters means more complex.
Yeah.
So then it takes longer to solve.
Yep.
So then I feel like if it takes longer to solve, then it could become less useful.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because it's more costly to get the answer.
That's
So
right.
then in that case, you might just find another solution. Is that why data scientists aren't useful?
No, we're very useful. By the way, thank you for giving the good conclusion there, because my voice, you sound better at saying it than I did. And you got it exactly right. No, data scientists are useful in part because a smart one would not let it get too complicated. They would tell their employer, hey, you've got this complicated state transition. If we approximate it with a Kalman filter, we might be able to calculate it in a faster period of time, which gives us an advantage over some more exhaustive way of doing it.
Well, I feel like most data scientists, their boss aren't savvy enough to understand that anyways.
Well, that's a conversation for a different episode.
What I'm saying is data scientists probably aren't discussing this with their boss. They probably have to make the call. Or just they have to ask business questions that lead them to
Yeah,
the
that's
answer.
true. Yeah, this would be more of a decision that a model designer would make, not something that a product owner would write up into the requirements.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Kalman filters, very popular in a lot of applications. I got introduced to them during a probabilistic robotics course I had. Or maybe I knew sooner than that, I'm not sure. But that's where I really used them hands-on in some projects. But they're useful for anything, any sort of state tracking application or stuff like that.
But in reality, not actually useful for tracking Yoshi.
Well, they are if you have good observations that are captured digitally.
Right. So maybe the technology isn't automated in there yet.
Yeah, not until I built some elaborate camera system.
To identifying birds.
Right.
A bird identification system.
Well, thanks as always for joining me, Linda.
Thank you, Kyle, for powering through with your voice.
Yes, indeed.
Data Skeptic is a listener-supported program. To support the show, visit dataskeptic.com and click on the membership tab.